Rookies have reported for Cincinnati Bengals training camp. Let's talk about the official moves they made and get into one final mailbag before Mock Turtle Soup.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, covering your team every day on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Shout out to the everydayers and all of you out there who make us your first listen. Appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. And if you're new to the show, you can subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts and join that group of everydayers who are up to date on all things Bengals here on Locked On Bengals. And as training camp ramps up this week, no better time than the present to do so. Today, we're going to start with some official roster moves the Bengals made, some players who ended up on some various injury lists, some players who avoided injury lists, as the rookies reported in an episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, where you will find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free right now if you're hiring at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. Terms and conditions apply. And James, we got the official injury list additions from the Cincinnati Bengals as rookies reported. And fair to say that there could be some additional moves coming here. It's uncertain, as maybe they need to see what shape some veterans are in when they report a little bit later this week. We'll discuss the moves the Bengals made in just a second, but before we get there, a lot of people have been asking James about Amarius Mims, the contract. Still not done, as rookies report, and it could be done by the time you're listening to this, and that is something I want to emphasize. To me, this isn't really a thing that I'm worried about until Wednesday, and if on Wednesday the team goes out there and Mims' deal isn't done, then I'm starting to raise an eyebrow. But this could happen literally any time between now and then, and I would put it in the realm of mostly normal.
I agree. He's one of two rookies from this 2024 draft class that is still unsigned. Dallas Turner of the Vikings is the other. And I talked with Andre Parada about this, and he's tweeted about it a little bit, but it's probably something as simple as bonus structure. And what's interesting is you have people that are criticizing the Bengals like, same old Bengals. I can't believe we went back in time. And who knows exactly what it is, but it could be as simple as, all right, the Bengals want to give you $4 million up front instead of $8 million right now, and then $2 million on September 30th or September 30th, and then $2 million on December 2nd, or something like that. And I'm just throwing out dates. He's going to get $8 million in bonus money. Like, all of that stuff is kind of there and set. So whatever the holdup is, it's pretty simple. There could be some language and stuff that's some offsetting language with the bonuses that could be in there as well. That's holding it up. But to your point, as long as he's there by Wednesday during the first official practice, this stuff that they're doing right now with the rookies is kind of just slowly ramping them up again. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing that they need him to be at. Is it weird or uncomfortable? Does it bring up thoughts and vibes from the old days because Mims is one of two rookies that hasn't signed his deal? Fine. I get it. But to your point, there really isn't much concern right now. I expect something to get done. I think it will get done. And it might get done by the time people listen or hear this.
It's not like there's negotiations. The contracts are pretty set in stone. They know what they're going to make because each draft pick in the first round or throughout the draft has a contract ascribed to it that tells you how much money is going to go into the contract. So there's no concern because there's no recourse for the player. The rookie players are entirely powerless in this process. There's no holdout possibility in the current CBA. It might take an extra day or two, which would not be ideal. It would be good to have him out there for that first practice, but it's not something that there's a realistic, something could go wrong here scenario in my head. And if it happens, then we'll have one that we can look back on and say, well, what went wrong there? And then we can talk about it. But he was there for the entire offseason program. Mm-hmm. I imagine if there was a serious contract dispute, he wouldn't have participated along the way. It's also notable that the one other rookie that hasn't signed his contract is the one pick ahead of Amarius Mims. And so I'm not worried about this.
And the other the other part, sorry, is like Caleb Williams just signed recently. Rome Odunze just signed recently. The Vikings just got something done with JJ McCarthy. Like, it isn't just the Bengals. Like, some of these top picks are taking a while. Heck, Trey Benson with the Cardinals got signed last week. Like, and he's a mid-round guy, a second, third round, late second, early third, whatever it was. So there's precedent here across the league where some guys it's just taking a bit longer. That's all.
And I would be curious to know like the actual reason, to the point of all the people that have asked about why isn't this done. I would be curious to know, and I don't know what the holdup is, or whether there is something that could be realistically described as a holdup. And like I said, by the time you hear this, and we're going to publish this early on Sunday because we know this could happen at any time, the deal could be done. If you're listening to this Sunday night, Monday morning, whenever it is, deal could be done, could be announced by then. And then we will have spent this time talking about a thing that has happened. Something that has certainly happened is the Bengals made some official roster moves on Saturday. 3 players placed on injured list. We have Eric All landing on the non-football injury list, which maybe sounds weird because he certainly got hurt playing football. But when that injury happens in college, non-football injury list is typical. That is a normal thing. Nothing weird happening there, in case you're curious about that. Devonta Maxwell and DJ Ivy land on the PUP list, physically unable to perform list. Those injuries happened while employed by an NFL team, and so they go to the PUP list.
Yep. No surprises here. I mentioned that DJ Ivy a tad bit behind Tyson Anderson in his recovery process. Not shocked that he's on the PUP list. Eric All, we talked about it the moment he was drafted, that this could be the scenario. Hopefully both guys ramp up, can start practicing in the near future. It would be great to see if that could happen. But my big takeaway, my clear takeaway out of this is Tyson Anderson. The fact that Tyson Anderson avoids these lists as of now, we'll see. But I know he's in town. So I think if he was going to go on the PUP list, it probably would have happened. Maybe it happens in the coming days when he actually has to report. But I don't think so. I think that he'll be fine. And hopefully it bolster that safety room, because I like the idea of Tyson Anderson. We saw him in the preseason last year, but of Tyson Anderson learning from Geno Stone, learning that deep safety spot. We saw his ball skills. And so having Jordan Battle and Von Bell, and then having a guy like Geno Stone kind of coach up Tyson Anderson, and Anderson be able to learn from him, that would be big starting in camp. So hopefully Tyson Anderson can get out there on Wednesday.
And he remains a very important special teamer for this team. We knew that would be the case for him when he was drafted in the 5th round a few years ago. He was one of the most experienced special teams players that you can really ever recall coming out of a draft in terms of the amount of special teams experience they had in college before arriving in the NFL. A lot of players have to learn that to a much greater degree in the NFL than Tyson Anderson did. He was a special team standout when he played in college. So having him back to both be a depth piece for the safety room, where he showed plenty of promise throughout his preseason safety playing playtime. He hasn't had much of an opportunity to do so in the regular season comparatively, obviously, would certainly be a shot in the arm for that safety room's depth, and something that I think we were expecting, especially with Dax Hill making the full-time transition to corner. Outside of that, DJ Ivy did have his surgery after Eric All, so when I believe, so watching those guys with their respective ACL recoveries will be interesting to see the timelines. We're about 9 months out from both of those, if I can do math, maybe 8 months out. Maybe I can't do math. December to July, late July. So those guys could be in the realm of getting off of those lists sometime in training camp, or that might linger into the regular season. And if they're not ready to go in training camp, they would revert most likely to the regular season PUP list, which would mean they miss at least the first 4 weeks. But for both of them, it would be great to have them back. Obviously, DJ Ivy and Eric Hall specifically, guys that it's easy to forecast having a bigger role on the team based on their history or based on their draft status or draft stock in Eric Hall's case. Obviously ideal to have those guys around for training camp reps and get them ready to go for the regular season. We'll see if that is possible or not. Going into training camp, James, people have questions, and a lot of those questions are on the defensive side of the ball. But since we talked about some of the camp battles that we're expecting to see in training camp, the first question we'll start with in just a minute is ranking the best camp battles that we expect to see starting next week. We'll get to that topic coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I don't want them to stop. And thank goodness that training camp is here. And maybe you're thinking about wagering on the NFL this season. Well, you got to get to FanDuel because they have all the future bets you could be looking for, from the Bengals' chances of winning a Lombardi in New Orleans. Right now, they're plus 1,400. Only the Chiefs, 49ers, Ravens, and Lions have better odds. They're tied with the Eagles for the 5th best odds to win the Super Bowl. So whether it's that or whether it's the fact that FanDuel all summer long is giving out a boost or a bonus daily to all customers, whether you've been a FanDuel customer for years or you're just signing up right now, all customers get a boost or a bonus daily. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
As we dive into the mailbag here, James, we will start with a question from Alex Hude on Twitter, who asks, what are the best position battles to look out for in training camp? And we can reflect over our training camp previews where we got into these in significantly more depth last week. So if you miss those, you can go check those out. But today we'll run through and try to rank them from most interesting to less interesting, but still interesting.
The first one is corner, and whether or not Dax Hill is going to push DJ Turner. If DJ Turner took a step and is going to seize that outside cornerback starting job, which guy does that? Do both guys push each other to the limit, and you look up and suddenly you feel really confident? Cam Taylor-Britt, Mike Hilton, and both Dax and DJ. That would be the ideal world. But I think that's the first position battle, probably the most important position battle. The second one for me that I'll be watching is what happens at wide receiver 3. Does Jermaine Burton play outside? Does he play inside? Does he just get a ton of slot snaps with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase on the outside? Do they rotate all of these guys? I think that is going to be interesting. Obviously, we've speculated a lot that they could rotate these guys. There's also a scenario where one of these guys emerges, and Jermaine Burton, from a draft stock perspective, is the highest on the list when you look at these other players that they've drafted over the past couple of years. So that dynamic is going to be interesting as well. So those are two. There are many, and we can rank those, but those are the two that I would say are 1, 2 in the James Rapine position battle ranking.
I think there's a clear 3 as well, which is punter. I think at least in terms of what will be scrutinized and what will be in the public eye, I think that the 2 years of a rough punt having a significant contribution to the Bengals' exit from the playoffs 2 years ago, to bringing in this drafted rookie last year in Brad Robbins, who did not have an excellent year as a rookie punter, showed some signs that he could be a good punter in the NFL, was, as you've mentioned many times, a totally fine and competent holder, and no complaints in that department. But they bring in one of the draftable graded punters, according to several punter evaluators in last year's draft, in Austin McNamara, as a college free agent, because he became a college free agent. And that should be a very real competition. But it's hard to argue with cornerback 2, wide receiver 3 being the first 2 in terms of importance, in terms of interest, because you've got a second-round pick in DJ Turner, who got onto the field very early in his career and established some trust with the Bengals coaching staff early in his career last year, and kind of hit that rookie wall, or the rookie wall hit him, as Lou Anarumo famously or infamously said back around the combine. And then you've got another very impactful position in wide receiver 3, in that rotation or lack thereof that could develop, and where Mike Gesicki fits into that with 2 tight end sets and him playing in the slot and all these things. Figuring out who that third receiving weapon will be certainly of importance to the offense. But yeah, I mean, a very high profile battle at corner, with Dax Hill making a very high profile position change as a former first round pick who just started an entire year at safety and then got moved to corner. I think that's a big one, and one that has the attention of some outside of Cincinnati. Justin M., who writes for the Draft Network, wrote a piece about expecting DJ Turner's breakout. And, I talked to him a little bit about that piece last week because I was like, I'm not sure. I think that's a real competition. I do think that DJ might have a bit of an edge here because he played corner before, but that's a pretty good article out there. I think I retweeted it if you want to go check out a bullish perspective, a bullish external perspective from a guy who was high on DJ Turner as a draft prospect going into his second year.
Sure. Yeah. Justin Mello was someone that is really good at following these prospects. And so a guy like DJ Turner, he's familiar with him for the past couple of years. So yeah, we'll see. I do think this, regardless, it's a true competition today. Could that change very quickly where there's clearly one that has the edge? Maybe, but this isn't a Trent Brown, Amarius Mims situation where it's like, well, Trent's probably going to start unless a Mims just blows them away. Where pretty obvious that from an edge standpoint, it's 51-49 maybe to one guy or another. Who knows? Maybe Dax is ahead in this competition. I don't think the Bengals are like anything more, whether it's the front office or the coaching staff, than for Dax Hill to blossom into an awesome player. Former first rounder. Clearly there's been some criticism and maybe a bit of a disconnect at times with what he should be used, how he should be used, all of those things. He just becomes this awesome outside corner. It solves all those problems because that's the most valuable thing he can become as an NFL player, even more so than a high-end safety if he becomes an awesome outside NFL corner. So we'll see, but that's got to be number one when it comes to camp battles.
Yeah, just getting one of these first-round picks since Jamar Chase to make an impact on the team this year, I think that would be a big win. And we have a lot of questions about Myles Murphy as well. I'm not forgetting about Myles Murphy. But if Dax Hill turns into a good starting corner, that is a great outcome for the Cincinnati Bengals. No doubt about that. The one other battle, actually there's two others that I want to allude to here or at least mention. The Von Bell Jordan battle, safety battle that could ensue. We talked a lot about that one last week. That's one that could bear watching, as Jordan Battle, depending on who you ask, played really well last year. And then the Bengals went out and got Von Bell anyway. And there are financial reasons that was very easy to do, but also they wanted Von Bell back. I think that was a no-brainer for them when he became available. The other one are more depth battles, but interior defensive line depth, I will find very interesting to see when and if Kris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson could get into the early parts of that defensive line rotation on the interior, where Myles Murphy is lining up, how much he's playing with the first unit, how much he's getting work on both sides, finding where those guys fit in. And we'll talk more about Myles Murphy here in just a second, but seeing where those rookies on the defensive interior step in is another one that I think will be pretty interesting.
For sure. My expectation is Kris Jenkins day one. So Wednesday, I expect to see him out there with the second unit. We'll see. But that's my expectations are pretty high for him, if you can't tell. So I think he's someone you draft because you think he can hit the ground running and be that instant impact type of guy in the middle of your defense, and especially in this division. So we'll see. But my expectations are high for Kris Jenkins as they are for any rookie in this class.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think that there is a proclivity for this coaching staff to give the guys that have a little bit more experience to run early in camp. So I will be interested to see, because if it is Wednesday, that would mean something, is why I bring that up. I think it would be somewhat meaningful in a positive direction for Kris Jenkins if he's getting those early reps right away. Because I don't think he was in the offseason program. I think he was still behind Zach Carter and some of these veterans that have been around the team for a little bit longer during the offseason program.
Dum.
Coming up next, we've got some questions about this defense, James. We spend a lot of time focusing on the offense of this team. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, the superstars that make the engine go. But will the defense be good enough? The defense has had instrumental parts, obviously, as another phase of the game in getting the Bengals to their deep playoff runs when they've had those in recent years. We'll discuss those questions coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for that role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. They aren't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You should too by going to linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
James, we have some questions here about this defense. The first one from Jay Shep at Sheppy452 on Twitter. The question is, what is the reasonable best case scenario for the defense? Does the roster have the upside of the defenses that helped take the Bengals to the Super Bowl in the AFC Championship game when they did?
Sure, the roster does. But the roster, I think how they win, if they do win, it's not going to be necessarily led by this defense. I think this defense, I do think the ceiling's a bit lower. Now, are there paths to it being as good or better? There are, but there's a lot of ifs. It's like if DJ Turner or Dax Hill become the borderline CB1 or CTB, Cam Taylor-Britt becomes CB1 clear cut, and then you have one of those guys emerge as CB2. It's not just that area either. Like Geno Stone, do you expect him? I think he's going to stabilize the back end and be really good. Is he going to be Jesse Bates in the playoffs when Jesse Bates was really good during those playoff runs? I'm not sure. And so there's a lot of ifs that could happen. But I think one thing is clear. It's going to look different. And that might mean the offense needing to score a bit more. That might mean the defense just winning in different ways, where maybe Myles Murphy emerges, right? Maybe that happens. Maybe Kris Jenkins has a bigger impact than some expect as a rookie. Certainly, I just mentioned how high my expectations are for him. So do I think the defense can still be good? Yes. Do I think they're going to be this elite unit? I think that's hard to expect, but I do think that they still have plenty of talent and things could fall into place. And it's on Lou Anarumo. It's on the veterans that they still do have to bounce back, the ones that struggled or the veterans that that played well to continue to play at a high level, the Trey Hendricksons of the world. You need him to be dominant again. And if that happens, you could look up and this defense could be able to go into Kansas City and slow down Patrick Mahomes some. I mean, they gave Mahomes some trouble last year with Jake Browning at quarterback for most of that game. So it's not unrealistic, but they're going to have to adjust some things.
Yeah, the defense showed at times last year, even when things weren't going well, they showed that they could get it together. But I think that the overall soundness of the back end is a big part of this in terms of doing their responsibilities, executing their responsibilities. The coverage bust that we saw down the stretch last year, you can't repeat those, and that's why they overhauled their safety room. But the next steps from the cornerbacks, from Cam Taylor-Britt taking another step to figuring out across the field with him, those are certainly big issues for this team. The safeties being more reliable and hopefully bringing up the level of play for the linebackers with them, that is a big deal for this defense. And then you didn't mention Sheldon Rankins. That's the other one that I would really bring up here. If there's
Sure.
a way to make it look different, it would be Myles Murphy is an impact pass rusher in year 2, and Sheldon Rankins brings a pass rushing presence on the interior that they did not have to that degree. They had the ability to push the pocket. Certainly, DJ Reader was a really good pass rusher for a nose tackle, and Sheldon Rankins is a bit of a different style of player in terms of ability to shed blocks immediately and then be in the quarterback's face immediately when things go right for him. He's at that very disruptive, quick win kind of 3-tech. And if he can bring that sort of pass rushing presence on the interior to go along with Trey Hendrickson and a step from Myles Murphy, a healthier Sam Hubbard, and the steady play of BJ Hill, who I think is still a steady player, that would be one way that this defense could take a step that they haven't really had in recent years, where the pass rush becomes a bona fide strength in addition to Trey Hendrickson, who's awesome. One of the top 10 edge players in the league, according to the recent ESPN survey, one of the best pass rushers in the league over the last few years that he's been a Bengal, certainly. But if they can find those compliments to him up front that make them a more consistent pass rush, really disrupting quarterbacks to a greater degree, that makes everything easier behind those guys, and will be one way to help this secondary in transition build confidence early in the year and then sustain it throughout the season, and could lead to an opportunistic defense as well, with more timely turnovers and takeaways. And that is something this team could need. I don't see them having the ceiling necessarily of some of those groups that took them deep into playoff runs in the past that were headlined by guys like DJ Reader and Jesse Bates and Chidobe Awuzie when he was in his pre-injury form, still playing really well in the Super Bowl run. Those guys aren't around, and they need to find the replacements. They need the linebackers to play better. And so it's hard to imagine them getting back to quite those levels where they played at that game-winning level in the playoffs. But there's some young pieces that could take steps and some different paths for them to get to still lofty heights on the defensive side of the ball.
For sure. Next question kind of falls in line with that. And really these two go together. So I'll read them both. Randy and Linda Byers at Bengals South. It seems to me there's too much talk of Murphy's playing time, Myles Murphy's playing time coming from Sam Hubbard. I think you also get some of Hendrick's early down snaps and can save Trey for pass situations. What are your thoughts on that? And then Lorenzo Smith brings up the battle. Could Myles beat out Hubbard? Could Kris Jenkins beat out BJ Hill? Are they more likely to be rotational depth for this year? The Myles Murphy one is really interesting because I think everyone wants to see him on the field. Your reaction to those questions?
I could see Murphy getting snaps on both sides. That is something that will be interesting to see in training camp. But on the money downs, you want Trey Hendrickson rushing off the right side. So is he a base down sub on the right side and a pass rushing sub on the left side? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they roll out there for the nickel packages, where Sam Hubbard lines up. This is something that we've been talking about all offseason. As far as the interior guys, Kris Jenkins beating out BJ Hill, I would be very surprised about that one. I think that Jenkins will be a high rotational player. He will get a fair share of snaps. I think we'll still see the Bengals do some 3 interior defensive lineman stuff, but I think that the starters, BJ Hill and Sheldon Rankins, are the starters there, and we'll see where the other guys fit in, McKinley Jackson, Kris Jenkins, in certain packages as role players. Not to say that means that they're not going to play much, but I think certainly role players behind those first 2 guys. What are your thoughts on these battles and rotations?
I think it could be dependent week to week. So, for example, Sam Hubbard, you like him on the field against Lamar Jackson because of what he can do to kind of slow down Lamar some. And so especially if Myles Murphy emerges as a pass rusher and shows that he's solid against the run too, can you give Trey a few extra breathers and put those guys on the field? Yeah, I like that, because you're going to see a lot of Derrick Henry. You're going to see a lot of runs. Lamar Jackson lost weight because he wants to be more dynamic. And so that's what's interesting is week to week, it could change. But in the AFC North, where you have quarterbacks, where Lamar Jackson is clearly the best quarterback not named Joe Burrow, you're going to see a lot of running the ball out of the Browns. The Ravens, that is still their bread and butter. You're going to see the Steelers with Russell Wilson, who's clearly not the guy he was a decade ago, run the ball a lot and lean on that. And so, I think in these AFC North games in particular, could the Hubbard-Murphy combo, if Murphy emerges, especially as a pass rusher, then that would be nice. And it would be nice to maximize Trey Hendrickson too. So I could see that. As far as a guy like Kris Jenkins starting, that's tough. It's a tough ask because you just don't need him to make an impact. You don't need to move him ahead of BJ Hill, who's in a contract year. Now, if he's head and shoulders above those guys, above a BJ Hill, then it could happen. But I think it's Rankins and Hill. And then you're hoping that Kris Jenkins can be that third guy that's rotating and giving you a big boost and doing a little bit of everything with that athleticism, with that run stopping ability, and hopefully as a pass rusher as well.
Yeah. The only other thing I'll mention here is Joseph Osai, Cam Sample still on the team. And they drafted Cedric Johnson in the 6th round. Jeff Gunter, 7th round last year. They liked what he did for them. and Justin Blazik, the college free agent they've got at the edge. He has a very uphill battle. But the point here is that there are 2 to 3 other players that could be defensive line depth to spell Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard more in addition to Myles Murphy. And then Joseph Osai will be fascinating to watch in a contract year this preseason and in training camp and early in the season to find out what kind of role he has and see if he can capitalize on some of the promise that we once felt, where he was pivotal in both helping and then eventually an unfortunate conclusion to the AFC Championship back a couple of years ago. Still a player that I think certainly bears watching, and a player that when he was drafted in the 3rd round, we thought was an absolute steal at the time. So some very interesting players and battles for playing time to show development along the defensive front at the edge position in particular, where I feel pretty good about their depth right now. It's just a matter of finding the high end to go along with Trey Hendrickson's high end as a pass rusher. And if Myles Murphy can do some of that this year to take a step as a 1st-round pick from last year, that would be another big shot in the arm for this Bengals defense. Tomorrow, James, there will be mock turtle soup served at Paycor Stadium. Depending on when you're listening to this, that could be today, but we will break down all of the interesting things that we hear from Bengals leadership in our next episode that will come to you after mock turtle soup on Monday. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.